This is the Master Athletics Squash Training Racket, and as you can see, it's pretty unusual, and I'm going to be talking about it. And in the first part, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and feelings about the racket. And in chapter 2, I'm going to answer readers' questions, and there's some really interesting ones in there. So, let's get started. So let's start right at the beginning. What is the purpose of the squash training racket? Well, you can see this little piece of paper. This little piece of paper represents the sweet spot. The sweet spot is the place on the strings where when the ball hits it, it feels perfect. And as you can see, it's quite small. Now, if I were to take a modern traditional shaped racket, you can see that the sweet spot is significantly smaller. And if I were to take a teardrop shaped racket, you can see that it's a different shape sweet spot. Effectively, the longer the strings, the further away the sweet spot is from the top frame. And if we were to compare finally a vintage racket, you can see that it's even smaller. Right, okay, so we've got that. Small sweet spot. So what's the benefit of a small sweet spot? Well, a small sweet spot means that you must focus and concentrate when hitting the ball. A big sweet spot means that you can be quite relaxed. So, by practicing with this racket, your timing, your contact accuracy, precision becomes much better, which means that over time you will hit more accurate shots. And that is the purpose of this racket. Now, one thing that you might have noticed is that this racket is a little bit shorter. Sort of go close up there. It's a little bit shorter. And the reason it's a little bit shorter, if you think about it, makes sense. Because if it was the same length as the other racket, the sweet spot would be right at the top of where a modern sweet spot is. And you want to, if possible, make it about the same distance from your hand with either type of racket. Because if you don't, then you're going to have to reaccustom yourself to using a traditional racket, a modern racket, let's call it, after playing with this. And you don't want that to happen. You want the transition between this to be much smoother. And that's why it's a little bit shorter. I went through 3 distinct stages of using this racket. Stage number 1. Oh my gosh, I am fantastic. My timing is perfect. Oh my golly, every shot in the centre. Now, that didn't really last very long, and I quickly moved on to stage 2. And stage 2 was, holy schmoly, this is hard. My timing is terrible. I'm the worst. I'm a beginner. This is, oh my God. And then, after a little while and a little practice, I moved on to stage 3, acceptance. Okay, it's clear that my timing is not perfect. Clearly, I am not a pro, but I can feel the benefit of using this. I do feel that over time, my timing is getting better. But a lot depends on the types of shots I play, and we don't notice that when we're using a modern racket because it's actually a lot more forgiving than we deserve. Hitting with the training racket is fun. It's fun because it's challenging. You immediately know when you hit the ball in the centre. There's no vibration and, like all rackets, the sound is different. There's definitely not as much power as with a modern racket, but that was never the intention. You can still hit it hard, just not as hard as with your current racket. However, the real benefit comes when you hit it slightly off centre. In a modern racket, you'd barely notice that. In fact, I would say that most amateurs hit 75% of their shots slightly off centre, but because modern rackets have such big sweet spots, it doesn't matter. It does with the Master Athletics Squash Training Racket. And this is why it's fun and challenging. Modern rackets have lulled us into a false sense of ability. This racket slaps us in the face and says, face it, you're not as skillful as you thought. It's binary. Hit well or hit badly. No intermediate stage. That is what forces you to focus. I hit shots off the frame at the beginning, but over time, as I concentrated more, I hit 90% on the sweet spot. Which leads me on to my final point, should you buy it? At the time of this video, it costs $149 on the Master Athletics website, which is €130 and £112. Not the most expensive racket that you can buy, but considering it's a training aid, then it's a significant investment. The answer is yes, but, and here is the but. Do you have regular coaching? Do you do solo or pairs training? Do you play conditioned games? Do you play in intra-club matches, inter-club matches, tournaments? Those kind of things. Do you represent a region? And if you do, then yes, you will benefit from it. Now, I'm not trying to gatekeep who can buy this. If you have the money, buy it. What I'm trying to explain is that if you are a casual player who thinks that I'm going to buy it and a few hits with this, I'm going to be jumping my level. I'm going to be beating people I've never beaten before. You are in for a shock. This is a medium to a long-term investment. And if you're having coaching, then it tells me that you're probably serious about your game and you will benefit from it. Now, one option, and I don't know how you feel about this, is a compromise. Imagine you've got 2 or 3 friends who play regularly and you do have coaching and you do practice. Well, why not buy it between you? I recognise as an individual, not as a squash coach, that $150 on a racket that you're only going to practice with sometimes is a lot of money. At least in euros, €130 is a lot of money. But if you have a group of 4 players and then you each put, I don't know, €40 each, okay, well, suddenly that's not too bad. And then you can share it during the month. I recommend that as a compromise if you're not convinced. Okay, so let's start with those readers' questions. Now, I just want to say that this is a selection of those questions, and I have created an extensive FAQ on my website. Link is in the text description. Now, most of these will be quick fire, so I'm just going to give the answer like as quickly as possible. Some might require a little bit longer. So the first question that we got, which was, why is the head so small? Well, I've covered that in my thoughts and feelings right at the beginning. The idea is that the smaller the head, the smaller the sweet spot, which means that you must really concentrate on the contact point. And that is the benefit. You get better and better and better at hitting the ball in the right place. And then when you go back to a traditional racket, it's going to feel easy. So what are the best drills to use with this racket and why? Well, I want to preface this by saying that the moment you start hitting these types of shots, you'll find it quite easy. And you'll find it easy because the ball is coming in a straight line, the racket is moving in more or less the same straight line, especially if you're sort of pushing like I was in that demonstration. And you'll think, oh, okay, it's not too hard, which was my stage 1. The moment the ball is not going in the straight line, that's when it gets difficult, and those are the types of drills. So, obviously, the figure of 8, the ball and the racket, great demonstration, the ball and the racket are moving in very different ways. As the ball comes from this corner, my racket is coming here. A fraction early, a fraction late, timing's gone. Here's a visual explanation of the intersect point. I'm about to hit a backhand figure of 8. The ball will roughly follow this path. After the ball hits the front and side walls, it's moving towards me. I now switch to my forehand preparation. I have to time my swing almost perfectly for the ball and racket head to intersect at exactly the right time. If I'm either too early or too late, the ball could hit the frame. Obviously, the volley is better, but if you can't do the volley, don't do the volley. Sorry about that. The next drill that I found, or type of drill that I found incredibly useful, was basically any contact above head height. Now, I found that the moment I'm making contact, whatever the drill, even if it's like a figure of 8, if it's like some service returns, if it's like trying to hit a nick, anything above the head was really difficult. More difficult than it would be in a normal racket, because it's not easy in a normal racket. But that would be one that I would be spending more time on. Maybe that was just me. Maybe my timing above my head is really bad. The next one would be those reaction volleys, you know, where you sort of just go up against the wall. I'm a bit further away than I would normally be, but these types of things, because again, you've got less margin of error. Less margin of error, less time to adapt. Your timing has to be perfect. Next drill would be shots off the back wall. And yes, I know that that seems to contradict my first point about the lines being straight. But the difference is that when it comes off the back wall, you've got to have really good technique because you have so little margin of error. So you're hitting off the back wall. And as you can see, my timing's not perfect. Down the middle is always hard. If you've never done that drill, try it. Down the middle is hard. But I found it particularly a little bit more difficult than I would be with a standard racket. And then the last thing to tell you is not a drill, it's matches, because the ball is wherever. And this will be a test rather than training of your ability to control the ball. So to summarize very quickly, anything that comes straight is probably not too hard. Anything where the ball is coming at an angle that intersects the motion of the racket head, this is the one that's going to give you the most benefit, and see if those high ones are difficult for you, because they certainly were for me. There's one more shot that I want to add for the which drills to do and why, but it's a combination of two of the shots. It's basically shots above the head and cross-court shots off difficult shots, because the cross-court is not moving in the same line as the ball. Now, you can do it from a straight feed. You can put it up here, and then you can hit one there. I'll try and do that out. There we go. Not a great shot, but that's the practice. Or better, you could do it with a figure of 8 feed to get the combination of high and the ball not intersecting at the right place. Highly recommend that one, but it depends if you can do it with a modern racket. If you can do it with your normal racket, great. If you can't, then don't even try it. Okay, I've had this type of question in very different forms. Essentially, why would I buy this when I can just go and buy one of these for like $15, £15, €15? And it's a good question. The reality is that it is a similar experience. Hitting with one of these is similar to hitting with one of these, but it's not the same. First thing to tell you is that this racket is much heavier. This is a standard type weight, so the swing is going to feel so much more similar to a modern racket, not a real racket. Next thing you'll know, and I mentioned this already, is the size of the sweet spot. Size of the sweet spot is much smaller, so that intensifies the benefit that you get. And then there is the point about where the sweet spot is. On this wooden racket, you'd need to hit the ball quite low to match where it would hit in a modern racket. Okay, so yes, some benefits from having one of these. If you have no other option, it's a good option, but it's definitely not as good as this. Swing weight, smaller head spot, sweet spot, and transition from this to a modern racket is so much smoother. Do I think that this is a good racket for people who have only played with modern rackets? And absolutely. I mean, if you've played with vintage rackets, okay, then you're going to get benefit as well. But there's no reason why, because you've only ever played with modern rackets, you can't use this. There is a significant difference between this and a modern racket. So I don't feel that you're only going to get benefit if you've only played with older rackets. Absolutely not. You will definitely get benefit even if you have the most modern racket. So this next question is related to the position of the sweet spot, is if this is in a different place to my racket, how am I going to move between the two? And it's a good question. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the sweet spot has been accounted for by the length of the racket, which is slightly smaller. So the sweet spot is more or less in the same place as most modern rackets. If you have a teardrop shape or a throatless racket, you might find that the sweet spot is a little bit lower than you're accustomed to, but that's okay. You'll still make the adjustment. If, however, you're playing with vintage rackets, then this racket is going to have a significant difference. But who plays with vintage rackets nowadays? So the quick answer is, don't worry about transitioning between this and a modern racket. The sweet spot is close enough for you to be able to make the adjustment very quickly. What's the weight and swing weight compared to modern rackets? Well, it's more or less about the same. It's actually got it on here. This is a 125 gram racket. I've put an extra grip on, so that changes it. Swing weight is very similar, although it does feel different because, of course, it doesn't have such a wide head. So there is a feeling of difference, but not as much as if you were to play with a vintage wooden or vintage graphite racket. That is a significant difference as far as the swing. I found transitioning from one to the other pretty smooth, pretty seamless, and the benefit is that when I do transition from this, it feels so easy going into a modern racket, and that's really the benefit, as long as you keep focusing on the contact point. What's the minimum level to benefit from this? And this is a very good question. Would I recommend juniors, and that was another question, and beginners using this? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend them using it because you've got to have good timing. You've got to know what good timing is before you can benefit from it. So where are we as far as what is the minimum level? I would say that you need to, and I'm not going to tell you numbers because I'm not too familiar with, like squash levels or any of those. What I am going to tell you is that you probably should be able to get the balls out of the back corner consistently. You probably should be able to do figure of eights. Maybe not 100 of them, but you probably should be able to do about 20, 25, something like that. If you have that level, you will benefit from using this racket regularly. If your level is lower, you might find it so frustrating that you're not hitting the center that it actually demotivates you. But I don't want to be a gatekeeper. If you have access to one of these and you've just started playing, try it. Maybe you'll benefit from it. Maybe you'll enjoy the challenge. I probably wouldn't recommend it for most people, but you could try at least. Is there a danger of getting so used to this racket that you can't go back? No, because going back is so much easier. There is a danger of you using it for a little while and thinking when you first go back, I'm now fantastic. I don't need to use this racket anymore. It's a bit like if you do some exercises and you get stronger and then you stop doing those exercises, you're going to lose the strength. If you don't constantly focus on your point of contact, you won't hit great shots. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to buy them and everyone has to keep using them. But if you buy one or you have access to one, you should keep using it in the longer term, or at least the medium term. And then the benefit will accrue over time. As I've said, or I will do later for sure, it's not a short-term thing. You can't hit with it for a couple of tries and think it's going to fix your timing. It's not. It's just going to make your timing better. So if it's not good enough now, it will get better. This is an interesting question, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer it effectively. If we gave this racket to the top 10 men and the top 10 women in the world, who would most benefit or who would play well? And honestly, if you're in the top 10 in the world, then you're going to be able to have fantastic timing with this. That question might be very interesting lower down the levels. Maybe not a pro, but high levels of player. I don't think you're going to be able to say that one particular style of play works better. You could argue, though, that any player whose game is based on absolute power would be at a slight disadvantage because you won't be able to generate that as much. If your game is based on moving your opponent, skill, control, accuracy, then yes, you would benefit from this. But at the pro level, it's going to be all of the same. But lower levels, it might not. So that's not really an answer, I know, but it's the best I could do. Okay, so the next one is another one that I might not be able to answer properly, which is, at what level could I compete with a person if I used a normal racket and they used one of these? I can't answer that because I no longer play due to hip and back issues. But what I would probably say is that if a person beats me 3-love, okay, and they played with this and I played with a normal one, I would probably beat them. All right, probably. It depends how easily they beat me 3-love. If those games are quite close, then I feel as though I'd probably beat them. If they beat me really easily 3-love, I don't think I would. And maybe that gives you some kind of guide that if a person is better than you, but not much better than you, you'd have a chance against them with them playing with this. But really, you shouldn't be thinking like that. It's not about who can play with it. It's about what benefit is to you for getting better. Next one is related to the drills question, which is the idea that should you only play matches with it or should you only drill with it? And as I mentioned in that previous question, you should drill with it first for a little bit to begin to feel comfortable, find out what areas are the weakest for you. I mentioned high shots. I feel now that I'm 80% as good as I am normally on my figure of eights with this. A little bit more practice, I might get to 90%. To be honest, I think I'm pretty good at my reaction volleys. I'm probably about 85, 90%. The real benefit for me would be sort of cross-court nicks. I found that really quite difficult. Anything quite high, and maybe some very low shots in the back corner. Those would be the ones that I would be practicing, because I feel that in a match, that would be where I would struggle. So start with drills, but definitely also use it for matches as well, but not serious matches, unless you want to. But I wouldn't recommend it. Is there any noticeable improvement when hitting with a traditional racket after using one of these? Yes, there is. And it's absolutely immediate. I guarantee that. You spend 5 or 10 minutes hitting with this and you go to your normal modern racket and it will seem like night and day. It will be so different. And it will be so much easier. Using your racket will seem so easy. But there is a trap here, and the trap is not to concentrate anymore. And you sort of become lazy. And that's why this is a medium to long-term investment, because it's not going to be you use it once and then you benefit from it. And I've said that so many times already, but I really want to press that point home. Yes, the moment you start hitting with your normal racket, it's going to feel easy. But that feeling will be lost over time, which is why you need to keep using this. Somebody has asked me about hitting soft shots, touch shots. And actually, I don't think that this is where you get the benefit of the racket so much. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the top soft shot player, but I'm managing to hit the ball consistently and feel as though I'm hitting in the centre. There's less swing, you're closer to the ball. What I will say is that after practicing with this for a little while, soft shots, you might find hitting with your current racket a little bit more powerful, but you'll need to practice. I made the adjustment pretty quickly, but I feel that might be one area that would be a difficult transition. Master Athletics provided the squash training racket to me free of charge, and I got to keep it. In fact, I'm keeping it in my bag because I love using it. They had no editorial control over this review.